All right, for more analysis, I want to bring in Eric Loeb. He's a professor of politics and international relations at Florida International University. Professor, good to see you. Thank you very much. So the president has said that he's identified possible candidates to take over leadership in Iran, but that those people who the United States and perhaps the CIA, along with the Israelis, had identified were killed in the initial attack. So how difficult will it be for the United States to find someone within the regime who is, it's hard to imagine that this is the word that would be applied to Iranian leadership, but friendly to U.S. and Israeli interests? And the reason I ask it and frame it in that way is there's been some written about what happened in Venezuela as it's a little bit of an apples to orange comparison, but that you removed a brutal dictator in Venezuela, replaced them with somebody who was in the regime, but who is open to working with the United States. That way, the United States doesn't have to put boots on the ground. That way, the United States, doesn't really affect regime change as much as it affects regime decapitation, is a word that I might use.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to think about there. And what we do know is that before the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, was killed, he had a plan that he put into motion in the event that he would be assassinated. And we're seeing that plan being executed as we speak in terms of a three-person council, interim leadership council that's running the country, composed of President Pezeshkian, who is a moderate and maybe more congenial to U.S. interests, although there's some debates around that. The head of the judiciary, who's a hardliner and would not be congenial, and then a senior cleric, Ali Reza Arafi, who's been behind the scenes, a longtime operative of Khamenei, and has been in key institutions of the state, who would also presumably not be congenial to U.S. or Western interests. So there'd be major question marks, even if these individuals remain alive, to what extent they'd be willing to work with the United States, and also thinking about how this conflict is going to evolve and end moving forward.
Yeah, it's such a complicated decision tree, as you say, right? Because are they alive? Would they be willing to work with it? There's so much uncertainty and different paths you could go down. But the previous Ayatollah, Khamenei, ruled Iran with absolute power for nearly 4 decades. How are Iranian officials likely to change what kind of power that next leader might hold if we were to get to a point where one of these people are alive and is able to affect that change?
Well, I mean, the next step for this three-person interim leadership council is to then put a list of candidates before an 88-member assembly of experts, which is responsible for supervising and selecting the next supreme leader, and they would be meeting to deliberate. And there's a question of the extent that this assembly really has power to do that, or whether they would just be following the orders really from the grave of Ali Khamenei in terms of selecting the next supreme leader. I would really keep an eye on Ali Reza Arafi. He really checks a lot of the boxes, but again, he based on the institutions that he's been involved with and some of his ideological positions, it would be doubtful, again, that he would be congenial not only to U.S. and Western interests, but that he would even create an opening for reform inside the country and give an opening for activists to instill or affect some type of meaningful political, economic, or social change.
Let you go in 20 seconds. I mean, it strikes me that it will be very difficult to do this if the Revolutionary Guard is still backing the clerics, is still backing the Ayatollahs. Is there a possibility that the clerics could lose that backing? Because you do need the Revolutionary Guard if you're not going to put boots on the ground. What do you think the likelihood of that is?
Well, that's absolutely right. And despite President Trump's statements about offering immunity to the members of the security apparatus, the IRGC, the military that defect, the fact is, and particularly the IRGC, is that for years they've been so well entrenched into the political and economy, actually, really benefiting from this system. So they would have a lot to lose from the standpoint of power and wealth if there would be some type of systemic change. And so beyond ideology, this explains why the IRGC still backs this system with the clerics and is willing to fight to the death to preserve it.
Wow, very interesting. Professor Eric Loeb, thank you very much for sharing your insight. We appreciate it.